This podcast is part of the Big Heads Media Podcast Network. Go to bigheadsmedia.com for more great podcasts.
Hello, Cardinal fans. Welcome to the 7th episode of the St. Louis Cardinals Unrestricted podcast. This is your host, Christian May Suzuki, and in this podcast, I'd like to start off by telling a little bit of a story. The story of an at-bat through the eyes of two teams. Well, I guess one. The first one is the St. Louis Cardinals before April 22nd, the day that they had their off day after a very rough first stretch in which they finished under 500. The second is the Cardinals after April 22nd, where they are now one of the best teams in the league by record. It starts with the first pitch, and prior to April 22nd St. Louis Cardinals, that first pitch was a strike only 54.4% of the time, which is pretty bad and put them last in the league. Now, after April 22nd, that first pitch is a strike 61.1% of the time, which puts them in the top half of the league. And just to disclaim, this is only for the starters, because obviously I think the starters have really made their mark in the last couple of weeks as a really key piece to this team's success. So we're going to see how much they've improved over that span of time since that fateful off day. Now, overall, you throw another pitch, and 16.7% of pitches thrown in at-bats for the Cardinals for Cardinal starters were thrown for strikes or called strikes. Since April 22nd, that number has risen to 18.1%, which puts them in the top 5 as compared to the bottom 10 before April 22nd. Now, with called strikes, you also have to put the ball in the zone, and the Cardinals have done a much better job at doing that since April 22nd. Before then, they were sitting at about 41.4% of their pitches in the zone, which was bottom 5 in the league. But after April 22nd, that number it bumped up a very small amount to 42.6%. But that small adjustment put them in the top half of the league. So, what's my point here? My point here is that a big part of the reason why Cardinal starters have been doing better is because they're throwing more strikes. They're putting the ball in the zone, and they're challenging hitters. And that's what Cardinal relievers have struggled a lot with for many years. And it's one of the most irritating things as a fan to watch a pitcher on their team walk guy after guy and not truly challenge them. And I think that's why I might have an issue with Carlos Martinez. But he's been pitching so well because he's been throwing strikes, and he's contributing to these stats that I'm showing here. So anyway, with that being said, with the increase in the pitches inside the zone, it makes pitches outside of the zone more successful. So before April 22nd, the Cardinals were allowing a 66.4% contact rate on pitches outside the zone. Now again, this is all just the starters. But after April 22nd, that number dropped drastically to 60.2%. Which is good for 7th lowest in the entire league. So what does this mean? This means that now that pitches aren't flying so far out of the zone and there's more control over them, pitchers have more control over the at-bats. So these pitches outside of the zone are much better and have that hitter much more off balance than they would if our starters didn't have control and weren't able to locate their pitches in the zone like they have been. So what does this result in? Well, the Cardinals' soft hit percentage allowed was pretty low before this. They only had a 14.4% soft hit percentage allowed, which was close to bottom 5 in the league. It was 24th. After April 22nd, that number rises all the way up to 18.8% for 9th in the league. So they're forcing soft hit contact, and they're making it so that guys just aren't hitting the ball as hard. And what happens when guys don't hit the ball as hard? they don't hit as many line drives. Before the big April 22nd, the Cardinals were second in line drives allowed at a 24.9% rate. But afterwards, that number dropped all the way down to under 20% at 19.8. So not hitting the ball as hard decreases the amount of liners, which are generally some of the best contact that you can make outside of home runs. And what comes of that? More grounders. Before, the Cardinals were at 40.2%, and afterwards they rose all the way up to above 45%. This all results in going from a 315 BABIP, which was second worst in the league before April 22nd, to now 237 after April 22nd, which slots in at fourth best in the league. This will translate as well to batting average improvements as well. The Cardinals were allowing a 237 batting average, which was 27th in the league before the April 22nd mark. But since then, they've allowed just a 200 batting average, which is fourth in the league. All of this stuff sounds great, but there are still some issues with the rotation. And those issues start, unfortunately, with John Gant. Now, as good as he's been, the Cardinals have allowed the second most walks since April 22nd among starters. And John Gant is a pretty big contributing factor to that. He has had issues keeping his pitch count low and keeping the ball in the zone. And that's part of the reason why I think at some point they need to put him back in the bullpen, as I've been saying. He's a guy who's done a very good job in a bullpen, done a good job with limited at-bats, and he was doing a great job. Now, not saying that he's not doing a great job right now, but with the number of walks that we're seeing every single start, it's a ticking time bomb. There's only so much time that we can continue to play with this before it's going to blow up in our faces. And hopefully the Cardinals will not let the bomb blow up in their faces. You know, there are obviously some other keys, but I think John Gant is the piece that all the keys revolve around. I think the big key is getting Gant back in the pen, as I've said, and that does rely on quite a few factors. It has to do with Hicks' recovery and whether or not he can get back and he can become a closer again, which would allow Alex Reyes to potentially start. You have Oviedo, who had a decent couple of starts, but has not quite shown that he's ready to be an everyday or an every rotation starter. He has a 96% whiff percentage, but some of the other metrics and the way that he's pitched and some of the runs that he's given up, it just shows that he isn't quite ready. He just hangs a few too many pitches, loses control a few too many times, and hopefully he can bring it together. He's a young kid, and I'm not saying I'm losing any faith in him or anything like that, but as of now, he's not quite ready to assume that role as a starter, and that sort of hamstrings the Cardinals into leaving Gant as that starter. So if we can just find another guy to fill in and to be that fifth starter and put John Gant back in the pen, then I think we will be in a very, very good position. You know, you have a closer, a very solid closer in either Reyes or Hicks. You have a couple of reliable guys in Giovanni Gallegos on the right-hand side and Genesis Cabrera on the left-hand side. So there's definitely a makings of a really good bullpen. It just takes that one starter, that one person who can show that he can get 5 or 6 innings, can get through the lineup once or twice at least, that we need to really complete this pitching staff. Because as good as John Gant has been, and as much as I like him, he's more of a bullpen guy, and that's where he is best suited, and that's where it's going to end up best suiting the team at some point. So it's just a matter of finding a guy to replace him. On the note of the rotation, I think another thing that I'd like to make mention of is how good Jack Flaherty is again. As I mentioned earlier, not earlier in this episode, but earlier in earlier episodes, Jack Flaherty is really good. He's got great stuff. His slider is it. His fastball is sharp. There are just some things that you can tell when you watch a guy play. Jack Flaherty had the it factor, had the clutchness, had the break on the slider, has everything that you want in an ace and a number one guy. And it just was a matter of time before he got back in rhythm after all the COVID stuff and just generally being out of rhythm as a pitcher in the pandemic, who was really getting his footing right before all of this happened. Now, obviously, pitching staff isn't the only thing that contributes to a team's success. You have the lineup, and the lineup has been putting in some work for sure. In particular, since putting Dylan Carlson in the 2 spot, which, as we've been saying, Cardinal fans alike, it's a good decision. It was a smart thing to do. The fact that he was at 7 in the first place was pretty ridiculous. Now, it's not just Carlson. He's been sort of the big bright spot. But I think everyone has done their fair share. Almost everyone. You know, Tommy Edman has been very surprising in my opinion. I did not think that he would round out into such a smooth and confident hitter. I didn't think he had the pop to really put balls in the outfield when he needed to. Not for just extra base hits, but enough to get a fair ball and get it down. But he's proven me wrong so far. He's looked good. He's played well defensively at second base to replace Colton Wong, although no one can truly replace Colton Wong. But he's done a good job for what he's been and what we expect him to be. Tommy Edman has done a very serviceable job, and I'm very surprised, and I'm hopeful that he can continue because has given me a lot of confidence in him in the way that he approaches. There's always that feeling that he has a chance to do something special or do something to get you on base. Now, as I said, putting Carlson at 2 is a good decision, so I'll skip that. But going to the 3rd spot, Goldie needs to be better, period. A sub 700 OPS for $26 million is not okay. And it seems like Cardinal fans may be cutting him a little too much slack because I guess we won't lose the trade either way. But the fact of the matter is that he needs to perform better for us to be successful. Now, obviously you have Arenado, and Arenado has been very clean. There's always that feeling that he can always do something, that he's always putting some sort of production forward, that he's always kind of doing the right thing, making the right play, and there's always a level of confidence that you have of him at the plate. You know, he could be better number-wise. An 851 OPS isn't great, but he's still hitting the ball pretty well in the 280s, and that's all I can ask with how well that he's been doing, or with how much better he's been doing than most of the team. Speaking of most of the team, the 2 guys that have really been struggling, I don't know if really been struggling is a good word, but who have definitely shown a great deal of room for improvement are Paul DeJong and Tyler O'Neill. I mean, Paul DeJong, there are some positives and there are some things that you can point to that indicate that he'll turn around or that he will make a jump and put his season back together. You know, his ISO is up to 2019 levels. It was at 211 in 2019. It's at 204 now. But at the end of the day, you still got to hit the ball before any of that matters. Power doesn't matter unless you actually put the bat on the baseball. So, you know, he's striking out at a decent rate. He's walking at a career rate. His walk rate continues to increase. I know there are things and numbers that would tell you that he has a chance to rebound, but I am just not a big Paul DeJong guy. Nothing personal, but when I watch him, I don't think that he is that guy that the Cardinals think he is, the 4-5 hitter. He just hasn't, he's shown pop, but not enough pop and not enough consistency at the plate to where I can trust him behind our best hitters, behind our most productive guys. And unfortunately, part of the reason he's still in some cases sitting there is because a guy like Tyler O'Neill just hasn't quite put it together yet. He's hitting decently at like 240, but he still has the same sort of issues where he is striking out a lot. Not as much as he was before. He's made improvements, but he's only got 2 walks. That's just not going to cut it, unfortunately. We can't have a guy who doesn't walk at all. I mean, I get low walks, but this is just unbelievable. And honestly, it's probably unsustainable. Until that streak is broken or until he starts walking a little bit more, it's hard for me to trust him protecting Nolan Arenado either. Now, the one guy, luckily, that we have that just came back recently, that I hope to see protecting Arenado on a more consistent basis for the moment is Yadier Molina. You know, what is there to be said about Yadier Molina and what he's done? It's been incredibly impressive. He has the highest OPS on the team. He's been hitting the ball well. He's been seeing pitches. What is there to be said? Yadier Molina is doing what Yadier Molina does, what he's done for many years now, and what Cardinal fans have enjoyed and reveled in for over a decade. You know, it's truly great to see how much better how much he's improved offensively. It's a testament to how hard he works and how much of a leader he is, and I will love Yachty until the day I die. And he is a first ballot Hall of Famer. In my eyes, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer, but I mean, I don't see that happening. But who knows? Who knows? Anyway, Justin Williams is one of the other outfielders that has been giving not a ridiculous amount of time, but a decent amount of time. And he certainly hasn't looked great at the plate at all. Now, whether or not he should be sent down is a matter in itself. It just sort of really depends, in my eyes, on the amount of playing time that they see for him in the future. At the end of the day, you don't want to do what you did to a Randall Grichuk, to a Colby Rasmus, to a Randy Arozarena, where you stunt their growth and you prevent them from learning from their mistakes by benching them every time they make a mistake and not allowing consistent playing time, not giving them more than 20, 25 games in a row where they can actually get used to playing the game of baseball at a major league level. So if you're going to give him some steady at-bats off the bench, then fine. Go ahead. Leave him here. But don't treat him like Grichuk or Arozarena. Let the kid play. You want to let these kids grow and develop and not just judge them based on what they're doing as a young kid. So it's just a matter of the way in which the Cardinals and Mike Shildt wish to approach this. And of course, I guess, of the health of the outfielders, which brings me to my last guy, Harrison Bader, who has shown some incredible power this year. I mean, that slugging percentage is something remarkable. He's hitting above his career average. He's got a 5-4 Ks to walk ratio, which is still impressive. But he's still got the same unfortunate issue that he's had his whole career. He is still whiffing on sliders like crazy. It's not as bad as his career, where his career he's at 18% whiffing on sliders, where as this year he's about 15.25%. But still, 15.25% of sliders whiffed on is still a very, very bad rate. And it still shows that he's having a lot of difficulty seeing them. Now, if the results keep coming, then there's not much to complain about. But it seems like, again, just like with O'Neill, this may be unsustainable at the level which he's doing it, with the amount he's whiffing on a certain pitch. It's not going to take long for teams to just throw slider. And some critics might say, well, one of his home runs has been on a breaking ball. It was on a curveball. Sure. But part of the difference between a curveball and a slider is the way it comes out, and the way that a slider mimics a fastball and the way it comes out a bit more than a curveball. So at the end of the day, while it is a breaking ball, the approach, the reason for the break, and the way that you see the ball coming out is completely different. So I don't think that gauging his ability to see sliders off of the fact that he hit a curveball for a home run is something that's logical. Now, of course, as I said, if results keep coming, then that's fine, and I'll eat my words, and I'll be happy for it, because I am a big Harrison Bader supporter through and through. In spite of some of the criticism and vitriol he gets from Cardinal fans, I think that he plays like he loves the game, and it might seem disrespectful or showboaty or whatnot, but he just looks like a young kid, a kid coming from my generation who just loves to play the game. And his improvements and his ability to hit the ball, his athleticism, all of these things make me very, very hopeful that he will be able to succeed, because having a good defensive outfielder at the level that Bader is at has been shown to be valuable through a guy who's very similar in Kevin Kiermaier. And if Bader can add power on top of that while hitting at a decent mark, then we have a very, very valuable player on our hands. So anyway, thank you all so much for listening to this episode of the St. Louis Cardinals Unrestricted podcast. Apologies for the inconsistency in the schedule, just a lot of personal stuff, a lot of technical issues, just made it a little bit more difficult these last couple weeks. But we should be on our regular schedule, coming out every Monday, starting next week. So anyway, thank you so much for listening, and stay tuned and just keep track of us on our social media, mainly on Twitter at STL Unrestricted. So thank you all so much, and hope you have a nice night, and really enjoy this Cardinals run, because it's impressive what they're doing. Being on top of the league right now is a hell of a job, and I really hope that they can keep it up, because I am worried, but I'm hopeful that Nolan Arenado, that Dylan Carlson, that Paul Goldschmidt, and that the starters can continue to really move this ship forward. So thank you all for listening, and see you next week. Go Cardinals.